Welcome back, everyone. Ibn Ishaq is one source for the Satanic verses, a topic that we've been covering recently, but it's widely known that he is frequently criticized as weak or inauthentic. Let's briefly explore why this is the case. In his book, Before Orthodoxy, the Satanic Verses in Early Islam, Shihab Ahmed described what he believed to be the proper approach to reading early Muslim sources. The first rule: don't read them as a single monolithic corpus. Doing so ignores important distinctions within these sources, as well as the different communities that produced the texts, and of course, their reasons for doing so. Most, if not all, viewers are aware of three major genres: the Sira Maghazi, the epic biography, the Tafsir, Quranic exegesis, and Hadith, words and deeds of Muhammad. However, there's something that's frequently missed in discussing these sources, although many scholars have drawn attention to it, including Shihab Ahmed. He states, "It has not been generally recognized that Sira Maghazi, Tafsir, and Hadith in the first 2 centuries of Islam were not only distinct literary genres, but also overlapping, yet ultimately distinct truth projects with different goals, different practitioners, different materials, different methods, different forms, different values, and different meanings. As such, there is no prima facie reason why the history of transmission of the memory of the Prophet in one of these 3 different projects, Hadith, should be the same as in the other projects. The Hadith scholars were building part of the foundation of Islamic law. What they were doing affected the way people would live their lives day to day, down to the smallest details. The Hadith project, then, was a self-consciously authoritative and prescriptive discourse aimed at defining the normative legal, praxial, and creedal content of Islam, and thus at constituting the articulated identity of the Muslim community. Their methodology was different from, say, the biographers, who were constructing a narrative of Muhammad's life to situate him in history, to show his triumphs, struggles, and his rise to alleged prophethood. They were building what Shihab Ahmed aptly called a foundational and moral historical epic. Problems arise then when Hadith standards are applied to the biographies or tafsir. These are different practitioners using different materials and different methods. Presumably, one could just as easily do the reverse and look suspiciously at the isolated, disconnected Hadith reports because they, unlike the biographies, are not situated within a larger, coherent narrative historical framework. Regardless, one thing is certain: the Hadith scholars drew a definite line between their academic guild and everyone else. These scholars composed discrediting and accrediting biographical literature to decide who was in and who was out. As Muslim bin Hajjaj notes from Abdullah bin Dhakwan, "In Medina, I have met 100 people, each one of whom was reliable. Hadith from them were not accepted, however, because they did not belong, as was said, to the people of the Hadith." Shihab Ahmed goes on to describe the resentment that these Hadith scholars developed for others. Indeed, a recurrent way of discrediting someone as an unreliable Hadith transmitter was, in effect, simply to point out that he was not really a Hadith scholar at all, but rather a mufassir, or one of the Ahl al-Maghazi. And as you can imagine, Ibn Ishaq was one of the targets of these attacks of the Hadith scholars. And as you can also imagine, the pre- and post-Hadith movement views of Ibn Ishaq, among others, varies. According to the pre-Hadith movement, he was one of the most learned men in Maghazi. After the Hadith movement began to develop, he was not reliable for religious obligations. This leads to a rather bizarre dual assessment by Ibn Hanbal. In Maghazi and the like, he is to be written from. In regard to the halal and haram, he needs to have his hand pulled and his fingers squeezed. Ibn Hanbal's son added that his father did not consider Ibn Ishaq an authority on the Sunan, that is, on the Sunnah of the Prophet, which are the words and deeds of the Prophet that establish legal, praxial, and creedal norms, and are precisely the historical memory materials with which the Hadith movement was primarily concerned. Ibn Ishaq was therefore only considered reliable by Hadith scholars when transmitting material other than that which established legal norms. But the standards of these Hadith scholars cannot be applied consistently. If Sir Maghazi materials were to be rejected on the basis of bad isnads, there would be virtually no narrative history of the life of the Prophet in existence, since the vast majority of materials treated by Sir Maghazi scholars were transmitted by what, in Hadith terms, were bad isnads. The same applies to tafsir. In fact, every tafsir before the time about 200 had to be rejected from the standpoint of later criticism. In addition, from a critical perspective, incomplete isnads could appear more authentic, at least initially, because they're less likely to be fabricated. Let's summarize. The biography, the exegesis, and hadith serve overlapping but different functions. These genres should not be read monolithically. Different methods were employed by different scholars in these various fields. The hadith project was authoritative and prescriptive, requiring justification accordingly. The hadith scholars determined after the fact who was authoritative by using their own criteria. The bizarre dual assessment of some scholars is indefensible. Think about that for a second. Muslim biographers like Ibn Ishaq did not have one deficient compartment in their brains, reserved for legal reports, and another reliable compartment in their brains, reserved for historical biography, such that one should be discarded and the other regarded as reliable. That's absurd. And finally, criticism of isnads in Ibn Ishaq and others is not convincing. Standards are applied inconsistently, and incomplete isnads are less likely to be forged, and therefore at least have the appearance of authenticity. It's tempting to see this as little more than a legal power grab by the hadith scholars. They want to make the rules. If a report touches on legal issues, then the biographers cannot be trusted. You need to be a member of the hadith community. Thus, the hadith scholars discredited other scholars using criteria and sources they themselves produced. And these methods employed by hadith scholars resulted in hadith scholars becoming the ultimate authorities, towering over earlier scholars specializing in different areas, like Ibn Ishaq. Perhaps even some Muslims watching this are realizing that something seems a bit suspicious. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.